This week we've got wet weather chaos, some hefty penalties from the stewards, and one of the most popular results probably ever. Hello everyone, welcome to Back of the Grid. I'm Chris, joined as always by on location Tom this week.
I mean, you say on location, people think I'm in Silverstone, but I'm not. I'm in a Welsh valley somewhere in the middle of Wales.
I'd say it feels a bit like one of those YouTube streams where someone just sets up in the middle of nowhere and the first person to find them wins a prize or something.
Hey, if someone can find me, I'll give them an empty can of beer.
It'd be impressive given that this is pre-recorded, but there we go.
I mean, by the time it goes out, I'll still technically be sat here.
There we go then. Such is Tom's commitment. He's still fully up to date with Formula One, despite being in a valley in Wales somewhere. So we are here.
Thank you, Elon Musk.
For the internet, for context.
Yes. Oh,
for no other reason.
Just for Starlink, that's it. Nothing else.
Yeah, we are here and set up to talk about a very good British Grand Prix. Really, really enjoyed that one.
Yeah, I mean, it was one of those where wasn't 100% sure if it would lead to the diverse sort of strategy gambles that we ended up getting. I'd been trying my best to follow the support stuff through the day. There you'd seen the F4 race. You'd got the F3 race that then got stopped and finished. Did it finish half points, that F3 race, or did they get full points? Did they do enough distance?
I think they might have just about done enough distance.
Yeah. So that one obviously got stopped with time to go. I then missed the F2 race because of travelling down here, but then arrived literally with minutes to spare to get the F1 on. So I was frantically trying to see what the weather had been doing. But yeah, overall, it was a really good weekend across, I'd say, all four of those series, to be brutally honest with you.
Yeah. As always, if you didn't see any of the support series, it's well worth going and checking out the highlights of them. There was some damn good races. The F2 race on Sunday especially was a really good one.
That's one I still need to catch back up on, but yeah.
And
a podium for friend of the show, Rowan, who was on recently. Rowan,
really good. Probably should have been two podiums actually, but he had a bit of bad luck in the first one, which is a shame.
Yeah.
But we are, let's face it, we're all here to talk about Nico Hulkenberg. Primarily, This is a Hulkenberg podcast because, what a drive. Every now and again, you get these results where every single person in the paddock is happy for it, and this is far and away one of those. His first podium on his 239th start in F1, the longest anyone has ever had to wait for a podium. And he did it from 19th on the grid, which was effectively last because Colapinto started in the pit lane. So basically last.
Yeah.
Carrying that back of the grid mantle all the way to the podium. And it's not even like there were... I suppose through there was about half a dozen cars dived into the pits at the end of the formation lap. So that gained him...
Yeah. Your most notable there were Leclerc and was it either Russell or Antonelli? It was one of the McLarens, wasn't it? Sorry, the McLarens, the Mercedes. They were the two notable hulls in the grid, let's say, up towards the front. Off the top of my head, I generally can't remember who else did, but even still to survive through the conditions and stuff like he did, it's just a solid drive. And it was a bit there were nervous times for me watching that because I'll always remember Hockenheim. I was joking in the Discord when we were watching it live, saying justice for Hockenheim, where he was running either second or third in that race and aquaplaned off in the final corner and into the wall and lost it. And I was just sort of thinking, especially when they moved to the slicks toward the end, I was thinking, please, 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 just keep it on the tarmac, keep it on the good stuff. But him and Norris probably waited the longest out of anyone to move to the slicks, which in the long run probably was one of the better calls, because I think there were a few people who went for the slicks just that bit too early, and they were struggling to stay on a completely dry line and get the
Yeah.
tyres warmed up and so on. Whereas with Hulkenberg and Norris, they came out after that dry line had formed just a little bit more, and it was a little bit safer and easier for them. But still, a solid drive from Hulkenberg.
That's
Really
actually
solid.
really notable looking at the tyre strategy graph here. Pretty much everyone behind the top three did at least 11 laps on the slicks at the end. Hulk did 10, Piastri did 9, and Norris did 8. So
Yeah,
that's pretty clear that a lot of people were diving onto them a little too early.
yeah,
Hulkenberg was the first to switch to a new set of inters, which also worked out really well for him. Like him and the team called that switch, I think, probably better than anyone else. But yeah, otherwise it was just a very fast, very clean, very composed drive from him.
yeah.
And just so good to see. Like you've only got to look at the way other drivers were kind of celebrating with him. Like Max Verstappen had just had one of the worst races of his life. But on the cool down lap, he like pulled alongside, and Max Verstappen was like pumping his fist like he'd just won a race
Yeah,
himself. And then you had Bortoletto like jumping on the radio and then greeting him out of the car. Like that was so nice to see as well. Just love to
yeah.
see it.
I think it'd be hard pushed to find anyone that's not happy about Hulkenberg getting that
Even
podium.
Lewis Hamilton seemed happy for him, and
Yeah,
he lost his podium streak as a result of Hulkenberg coming third.
yeah,
And it's kind of worth noting for those who are maybe a bit newer to F1, like briefly Hulkenberg's history in F1, because it's a weird career he's had. Like he's
yeah.
been around since 2010. He was GP2 champion when he joined Williams in 2010.
Hmm.
In his first season in the wet, funnily enough, he took pole position over Vettel by like more than a second. He absolutely schooled everyone in qualifying, and he was running really well in that race. But I can't remember specifically, but something went wrong then, and he dropped out to
Is
the
that
top three.
is that the Interlagos one? Or is that a
He's
different
had a
one?
couple of close calls in Interlagos.
I know there was an Interlagos situation where he might have even been on to win that one, and
That was
he came together with
20,
Hamilton.
2012, yeah, after he'd
Yeah.
moved to Force India.
Yeah, so that was
Yeah,
a Force India race, wasn't
he
it?
was
Yeah.
leading for a big chunk of that and had a collision with Hamilton. And he's bounced around so much. Like after Force India went to Sauber, then back to Force India, then Renault for a while. And he had good results with all of them. He's come fourth multiple times.
Yeah.
None of it though enough for him to keep his race seat for 2020. Renault dropped him and he moved back to Racing Point as reserve driver, and looked to everyone like that was the end of his career. And then 2020 being what 2020 was, he ended up having to step in as reserve at very short notice in Britain and Germany. And he ended up sticking it third in qualifying at Silverstone in 2020. That was the old pink Mercedes year. And he picked up points in both of those. Stuck around as they became Aston Martin and did another couple of reserve appearances over the next couple of years. And then obviously Haas then brought him back full time in 2023. And, for a driver to have, 3 years out of the sport and then come back as a full-time driver is pretty unheard of.
I mean, it's testament to his reserve appearances, I think, that the fact that on those occasions that he did get called up due to like people being sick with COVID, essentially, like he was coming in and he was scoring points in the car, and I mean, I know in those seasons the cars that he got in were capable of points anyway. It's not like they were garbage cars he was somehow getting a result out of. They were point scoring cars, but to jump into a car that you've not been in, or only been on a simulator or whatever it may be, and then on a short notice race weekend go and deliver with it, it shows a certain level. And I mean, you got to remember the guy's a Le Mans winner. He won Le Mans while being an active full season Formula One driver, if I remember
on
right.
his weekend off. Yeah.
Yeah. So, like, And I know Alonso has obviously done similar things of like, whilst racing at McLaren, he dabbled with both Le Mans and IndyCar and stuff like that. But obviously, Hulkenberg went and actually won the thing. So,
Yeah,
and with Porsche as well. So,
yeah.
yeah,
It's like he's had a career of never quite getting the big seats, never quite being in the right place at the right time. Like when Rosberg retired, Hulk was basically second on Toto Wolff's list to
yeah,
replace him at Mercedes, and they managed to get the Bottas deal done. He came very close, I believe, to a Red Bull seat at one point in time. I think there were rumours linking him to Ferrari at another point in time, and there's always been one or two drivers ahead of him in the queue. So,
yeah,
for someone as big as Audi to have now signed him, and it seems like he's going to be there for the next few years at least. Just really hope it works out for him and he does get to run at the front a bit more often, because he's clearly a very talented guy and just sadly has never consistently had the car underneath him.
yeah.
But yeah, on this
Or just
occasion,
had
finally
just
has.
had bad luck in those
Yeah,
scenarios where he has had an opportunity and just things haven't quite fallen into place, which I think there were a number of people who've been around the sport like 10, 15 years and seen the majority of his career who were all sat in those final laps when he went into slicks, just biting nails and crossing fingers and toes and all that sort of superstitious stuff,
yeah.
thinking, please just let him get to the end now.
I don't
Uh,
think you're ever going to get another situation where you're watching a driver win his home race for the first time and more people care about the guy coming third. But
yeah,
everyone was
yeah,
rooting for him. So good.
yeah,
Yeah, I'm just so happy for him.
definitely.
Really, really well deserved. But I guess we should talk about the winners. And it was a first home win for Lando Norris and a 1-2 for McLaren. I mean, the gap kind of fluctuated a bit throughout the race. Piastri was mighty in the opening phase of the race.
Yeah,
He obviously got past Verstappen fairly early on when Verstappen ran off. Well, maybe we'll get on to Verstappen, but he's had a rough old day. Norris took him a little bit longer to get by. I think it was another mistake from Verstappen eventually that let Norris by, but Piastri pulled a healthy lead in that opening stint. Later in the race, Norris seemed to have better pace, particularly as it dried towards the end, but ultimately it was that penalty that decided the order they finished. A 10-second penalty for Piastri for erratic driving under the safety car. I'll give you what the steward said, and then we can discuss the
yeah,
what we think of it. So the steward said when the clerk of the course had declared the safety car was coming in that lap and the lights were extinguished, car 81 suddenly braked hard, 59.2 psi of brake pressure, and reduced speed in the middle of the straight between turn 14 and turn 15 from 218 kilometers an hour to 52 kilometers an hour, resulting in car one having to take evasive action to avoid a collision. They deemed that to be erratic driving in the safety car. He got a 10-second penalty and I believe 2 license points as well. He argued pretty staunchly that he didn't deserve a penalty, as you'd expect. Some people, Max Verstappen included, have pointed to Russell in Canada doing a bit of a safety car braking and not getting a penalty, because there was, I think Verstappen ended up passing and having to let back through Russell through that. But what do you think? What do you reckon to this penalty?
I mean, I think it's about right. I've not got much argument with it. I think that there's there was a little bit of like, I guess, animosity towards it all from Piastri post race. He was very downbeat about the whole situation, and a couple of the comments that he had about it were things like it was the same thing I'd done any other lap or any other restart or whatever, because we obviously had more than one restart as well, didn't we? But the little bits of an analysis show that he definitely braked a lot heavier on that particular restart. Um, there was then a bit of a counter to it of, well, the lights on the safety car went out pretty late and I needed to build a gap. But we all know at Silverstone, like that pit entry is way before you enter that little section for club.
Yeah.
So like the safety car is out of the way, it's gone. It's not like other circuits where you need to start dropping back and let it get away and disappear. You you can start you slowing the pace down and dictating how you want to do it before heading into club and then round onto the start finish straight. So yeah, I don't really buy any of this sort of the excuses or reasonings behind it being done. I think had it been a dry restart, then maybe you would have either got slightly less of a penalty or possibly got away with it. But I think he'd have probably picked up something regardless. But I think in the conditions they were in, it makes it just that much more dangerous. The fact that people, I mean, wa- was this before or after the situation with Antonelli and
This was
Hajar?
before, I think.
But like that example just shows that like how easily the cars disappear and with the amount of spray that there is, it's difficult to judge exactly how close you are to something, and you can't see them to judge their speed. So I think there's a lot of that will play into it as a factor that maybe in the dry, easier to get away with, but in the wet, it becomes just instantly a lot more dangerous because of those situations.
Yeah, I agree. Like the Russell comparison that some people have made doesn't hold water for me. Like it was in the dry. It wasn't a safety car restart. It was just behind safety car laps. Russell used like half the brake pressure. He started off at a slower speed, reduced by less speed. Like he was nowhere near as dangerous a thing. And the stewards do come down hard on anything around safety procedures like this. And
Yeah.
if you want to know why, go and watch Mugello in 2020. That
Yes.
is the
Was that
kind of
Leclerc?
I forget who he was leading at that point. It might have been Leclerc, yeah. But that was another situation where someone went and then stopped and the whole field concertinaed up and there were like five or
Yeah.
six retirements, I think. And that was in the dry with full visibility. Like
There was a
in
there was a similar one with um Giovinazzi somewhere down the field at, I want to say, China.
yeah,
And
that sounds
Antonelli went
familiar,
through the
yeah.
back of someone because of the whole concertina effect. Like everyone just started stopping in front of him. Did I say Antonelli then? I meant
She did, yeah.
Giovinazzi. Giovinazzi had someone like slow in front of him and he just kind of went through the back of them from what I remember. I feel like that was in China somewhere. But again, similar
Yeah.
situation of heavy stopping and slowing down at the front of the pack and then everybody else trying to react to it. Still no excuse for what Lance Stroll did in China, but that's a different story entirely.
And I do think with a bit of hindsight, Piastri will probably look at this and say, okay, fair enough, that was outside of what's allowed. Like
Yeah,
it was just a mistake on his part ultimately.
it's interesting, isn't it? Because normally Piastri is quite calm and collected about these things, doesn't let it get to him, and just gets on with it, and maybe has a bit of a word about these things behind closed doors. But generally speaking, doesn't happen there in the moment on the track. And I feel like I'm not saying it was entirely down to this, obviously, but there's an element of that's a bit of a slightly upset, rattled Piastri, and he was definitely slower in the second half of that race compared to Norris. So, as maybe some of that got in his head and he's driving a little bit angry because of that situation, instead of being his normal chilled out self that just goes on and with things and gets them done, it maybe had a little bit of an impact on his performance for the second half of the race, but it's not like he was slow. It was just that Norris had a better handle in that second
Yeah.
half.
I mean, it was the most emotion we've ever seen from Oscar Piastri by a country mile, but that's a pretty low bar. So
Yeah, he did a decent imitation of someone, unintentionally, I think, but it was like um, I know it was the Mourinho thing, the Jose Mourinho thing. If you remember back in the day when he was maybe when he was at Chelsea or somewhere, but he said something like I do not speak because
Yes.
or whatever it was. I can't remember exactly what it was word for word, but like essentially saying, I can't say what I want to say because I'll get in trouble.
Yeah.
And Piastri said something along those lines of, but I'm not going to speak about it because I don't want to get in trouble. And then just literally just walked off. Like,
Yeah.
that was it. Job done.
Very much Max Verstappen's approach this year as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
Speaking of Max, now this isn't for a second trying to do any blame shifting. However, do you think he tried to make it look worse than it was
Um,
in terms of having to take avoiding action?
mm, from his on board, I'm going to say no, just because you genuinely can't see Piastri at one
Yeah.
point. And I think when you then suddenly closing so quickly on a blinking red light that just comes out of the mist and it's almost I mean, I know 50 kilometers an hour is pretty quick compared to everyone in the road cars, but when these guys are driving 200 to 300 kilometers in most scenarios, like that is a very slow car. That's like being on a motorway or a freeway or something in similar sprayy conditions, and then suddenly there's a car doing like 25, 30 mile an hour in
Yeah.
front of you when you're doing 70 miles an hour or something like that. Like that's the kind of equivalent. And in that scenario, I think I'm like looking over my right shoulder and seeing if I can take some sort of evasive action to go to the right of that car. So I don't think he. I mean, I'm not saying he didn't embellish whatever he was doing to maybe a bit of gamesmanship, like making it look quick. Like once he was alongside him, he could have probably slowed down quicker. Is what I'm getting at, I guess. Like he didn't have
Yeah,
to
possibly.
maintain his speed as much once he'd made the evasive action. So maybe a little bit of gamesmanship there, but also in that moment, he's just thinking, I need to get out of the way of this car. Like he's not thinking about the immediacy of bringing the car down to a slower speed. He's thinking, I need to get away from this.
Plus, in those conditions, you can't just go slamming the brakes on full because you're just going to
Yeah,
aquaplane into the back of the guy in front of you.
yeah,
Yeah, I mean, I don't
yeah.
think he particularly was either. Because I
No,
know there was some discussion again going back to Canada with Russell that maybe Max made a bit of a meal of it, and there might be a bit more to that one. But yeah, I think on this occasion it seemed pretty genuine to me.
yeah, I'd say so.
But yeah, as it was, he did get a 10-second penalty taken in his next pit stop, which gave Norris the lead. One interesting thing I didn't think of, I've seen mentioned since, McLaren would have had a real problem if another full safety car had been called,
Yeah,
because they would either have to have double stacked and basically give Norris a 10-second penalty as well, or leave one of them out and get screwed over by safety car timing. So they got quite lucky in that respect. But
yeah,
yes,
like yeah. It was either a scenario where they had to do what they did, which was obviously pit Piastri and just tell Norris he needs to do a lap or two more because of the penalty, or you'd have possibly switched to giving Norris the preferential first pit stop, just on the basis
yeah,
that you know that Piastri's got a penalty anyway. Um, and you kind of you know that you're switching your strategy to the other driver at that point, even though they're physically on track in second, they're ultimately in de facto lead of the race. So yeah, the main thing that would have scuppered them would have been a safety car,
yeah.
or a virtual safety car. But luckily, it didn't come to that for them.
But yeah, very popular home win for Lando Norris. His second
Yeah.
win in a row. First time he's won two in a row, in fact,
Wow.
which brings the championship gap down to 8 points now.
It's swinging back, isn't it? Like he's
Yeah,
feels like he's maybe found a bit of that confidence back. I
definitely.
mean, I noticed this after qualifying. So we had a conversation about him a few weeks ago, about just like the kind of negative attitude in bad situations and it maybe having a negative effect on him overall and affecting his performances. But then what we then saw of him in quali, where he didn't manage to get the laps together in quali and qualified third, and it's not ideal going into the race and so on. But he was still fairly upbeat in the press pen afterwards. Like, people were people were trying almost to bring him down, saying, "Well, this
Yeah,
is not where you want to be at your home race, is it?" And but he was actually quite positive about it, and he was just saying like, "Well, look, I'm towards the front. It's my home Grand Prix, so it's a good feeling to be that close to the front. Yes, pole would be better, but." It's not like I'm at the back. Like I'm in the mix with the two guys I need to be beating, and I can go racing with them tomorrow. Like so, that's all I'm looking ahead to, and that feels like a definite shift from where we've seen him in the past. In the sense that I feel like in the past, like in even in earlier times this year, like if somebody had said to him, "Oh well, third's not very good at your home race, is it, Lando?" In a roundabout fashion, he'd have been like,
yeah.
yeah, it's like I might as well be at the back. Like there's been way more negativity. Now,
It
whether that's just the buzz of being at home in Silverstone, or whether that's that he has been working on that side of things and
I think we
he's
saw a
starting
bit
to
of
see
that.
the dividends of it. I don't
We
know.
saw with that last race as well. I think like coming out of his retirement in Canada, we talked about how is he going to bounce back from this. This could easily be the beginning of a bit of a spiral for him, and he seems to have managed to do the opposite. Like he's
Yeah,
followed up with 2 victories in a row. He definitely seems in a much better headspace, as you've said. And again, for a championship fight, great that he's got these 2 victories and closed the gap again, because it's an exciting fight between the two of them, and we want this to go all the way to the wire. And right now, it's very much looking that way.
yeah.
Um, let's do Ferrari next. Hamilton was really disappointed after the race. I mean, obviously he was within touching distance of a podium and didn't get it. He's lost that incredible podium streak we talked about last week. Given everything that he said was he was struggling against, I think fourth is still a pretty good result for him. Like that car really didn't like those conditions, and strategically, I mean, they were fine strategically. I guess they essentially mirrored the McLaren strategy. Probably went to the slicks a little too early at the end, but for the most part, I thought that was a pretty damn good drive from Hamilton to bring that home in fourth.
Yeah, I mean, there were moments where you saw the flashes of literally what we talked about in the preview of
Yeah,
Lewis in the wet at Silverstone will always be a threat, and you definitely saw elements of that. But between what you saw from both him and Charles of trying to handle the car through like the high speed stuff like Maggots and Beckett's and what have you in the wetter conditions, it just didn't want to know, did it? Like
no,
Charles was really lucky at one point with the way that he like lost. I think he lost grip in the front essentially and had to like back out of it and
yeah.
ended up just literally going straight across the gravel at Maggots.
I don't know how he finished that race. Honestly, he had
No,
so many offs. He had I think he had contact with Carlos Sainz twice throughout the race. I've seen one of them, but I think there were two. I mean, Chuck had a terrible day. He was one of the ones who gambled on switching to slicks
yeah,
at the end of the formation lap, which didn't work all for him.
bad
Um,
idea.
yeah, so he ended up having to take that middle set of mediums. Sorry, middle set of intermediates, a bit longer than a lot of people. But yeah, he had a terrible time of it.
Yeah, yeah, that definitely didn't help the gamble at the start, but even on the Inters compared to some, I mean, I know that a lot of people struggled at certain times during that race, like when the rain was heavier and stuff like that. But essentially, like the Ferrari looked like possibly one of the worst handling cars in
Yeah,
those conditions on the grid. So I think for Lewis to have gained anything and then come so close to getting a podium in the sort of later stages of the race, I think the switch to softs as early as they did is probably what cost him that podium because he had that big off coming out of the pits
yeah,
and ended up behind Charles at one point because of that. Who was also having an off at the same time, from what I remember seeing on
yeah.
the replay. They were both off the track in different areas and then rejoined together. It was just so weird. But I think uh, maybe he did lose about 6 seconds in it. I don't know, but I think he finished somewhere like 6 seconds behind Hulkenberg, and it wouldn't
About that.
surprise
Yeah,
me if that is where he lost the majority of that because he was pretty
totally.
close to Hulkenberg. So yeah, Before that, I mean, sorry, before
Yeah.
the pit stops.
Yeah. I mean, really bad day for Ferrari, but somehow they still ended up. Well, I say somehow, we know exactly how they ended up increasing their gap over Mercedes
Yeah,
in the constructors, but that's because Mercedes were just awful from start to
actually, yeah,
finish.
I say if the Ferrari looked like one of the worst cars, but maybe the Mercedes was worse. It's so weird, isn't it? When you look at that grid and you think this weekend Ferrari and Mercedes were probably the two worst cars.
They just looked horrible the entire day.
Like, I know Max and particularly Yuki struggled in the Red Bull, but from Max's perspective, that was definitely more the gamble of like the low downforce setup to try and put themselves at the front of the pack for the race start. And you know what? Had it stayed dry on Sunday, that gamble might have paid off for them as well because
Yeah,
it'd have been enough to counter being followed by people with DRS, possibly. Not saying he would have been able to hold off the McLarens, but had he been dry, he'd have probably had a better chance of holding them off for sure. But in those wet conditions, he just lost all grip essentially. And I
I
mean, you saw how
mean,
many times he made mistakes. He lost the car, however you want to put it. Like we all know what Verstappen is capable of in the wet, but I think a car in that config is even beyond his capabilities.
he was just doing well to even keep it on the road in that opening
Yeah,
phase. Yeah, it looked miserable. I mean, yeah, very impressive pole lap, but yeah, I mean, the second we got to Sunday and it was raining, I think everyone knew he was basically screwed at that point.
yeah.
And then yeah, had that spin at the restart as well, which was a little uncharacteristic for him. But again, trying to get the power down in the wet when you've got a Monza spec rear wing on there is never
Yeah,
going to go well.
crazy.
We'll do Tsunoda as well. We're talking Red Bull.
Hmm.
As we've said before, started the weekend really well. He was looking really good for a Q3 spot. He was kind of right on the Q3 sort of pace. This time, it wasn't him that messed it up. It was the car. He had a power deployment issue, so he couldn't get in a proper lap in Q1 and dropped him out right at the back. And then in the race, he just had a really struggle for pace. He also had he spun Behrman round at one point and he got
Yeah,
I believe a 10-second penalty for that, which dropped him to the back, basically where he stayed. He basically, after the race, he's just a bit lost as to why there's such a lack of pace at the moment.
hmm
It's really, really in a bad place with Tsunoda at the moment. And, this is the guy who I think it was fifth he qualified in Bahrain in an RB. Like, this
yeah.
is a guy, this isn't just some slouch. We've seen really good results from him beginning of this year and all of last year. But like with many Red Bull drivers before him, it's just still not working for him, and it
I mean,
sucks, man.
at this point, I know they have to field two cars, but Red Bull would genuinely just be better fielding one car with Max in it and just focusing 100% attention on that and just not having a second car if they could get away with it.
I
Like, go on.
I actually read earlier today some excerpts from an interview Sergio Perez did with I think it was like Mexican TV or something about various things. But one of the things he supposedly said was Christian Horner admitted to me that we only run a second car because the regulations say we have to. If they didn't, we
Yeah.
wouldn't bother. Which
To be fair, that sort of semi checks out because to some degree anyway, because there was a time way back in the early days of Red Bull when they took over Jaguar. Um, I think it was more just early budget issues at the time, but there was essentially a phase where I think it was Webber and Coulthard racing together, or I'm trying to think who else was there, but I'm pretty sure it was Webber and
Christian
Coulthard.
Clean was there really early on as well.
That was part of the Jaguar takeover, and I think Clean left and
Yeah.
Coulthard came in. But Coulthard was basically running like a garbage car and was just there to turn up. And if you remember, Coulthard crashed that car a heck of a lot. Like he was,
Yeah.
or at least, well, he retired it a lot. He didn't necessarily always crash it, but there was a lot of talk at that time of Coulthard is essentially just there to take that car out and make sure it appears to meet regulations, and then
Yeah.
retire it for whatever reason because they can't fully afford to run it. And that was, what's that, like 20 years ago now, something like that, I think.
Yeah, it must be.
Yeah,
Yeah, well, it's
crazy.
the RB23, is it this year's car, I think?
Yeah, I think so.
So, yeah, it must be about
So yeah,
that.
it'd be about 20 years ago.
Yeah. But yeah, it's really hard to see for Tsunoda because, a lot of people, myself included, wanting to see him get the chance at Red Bull, and just absolutely nothing's working out for him.
Nothing
I
works
hope.
out for anybody in that seat,
No.
unfortunately.
We'll do Alpine next, chiefly because Gasly had another fantastic weekend. Made Q3 again. Finished sixth place, past Stroll on the final lap to take sixth. Another really good drive from him. Gasly this year continues to put in really good performances in an absolute shed of a car. That Alpine just is awful, and he's really pulling some results out of it. Less so in the other Alpine. Colapinto had another, he spun off in quali and ended up last on the grid again. They did a pit lane start, and it sounds like the car got stuck in first gear and couldn't get it going at the start, which it sounds like it's a recurring gremlin from an issue they've had earlier in the season. So yeah, tough for him, but I mean, that qualifying spin wasn't good.
No.
And the talk of Bottas replacing him is really ramping up now. Toto admitted over the weekend that he has been having talks with Alpine about how they would make that change work. So it looks like it's going to happen sooner rather than later at the moment, which I have mixed feelings about. I mean, I think...
Yeah, I'm with you on that. Like, as much as I would like to see Bottas make his way back onto the grid and have another go at things, where they're doing it in a team like Alpine, I'd much prefer him to be getting something like the Cadillac seat. And at least if it's not a great car, it's an opportunity of being part of something new and building on it.
Yeah, and this is the thing, like, does doing half a season in an Alpine, is that going to help or hurt his chances of getting the Cadillac seat? It's really hard to know with a car as bad as it is. I'd like to think he'll be able to put in the sort of performances Gasly's been able to, but Gasly's been in that team for a few years now and knows that car. Bottas would be going into a brand new team, driving an engine he's never driven before. Yeah, could be a difficult one.
Yeah.
And equally, I don't think they've given Colapinto long enough either. Like, I don't think they really gave Doohan long enough. Doohan had a lot more preparation time. I don't think Colapinto's been given long enough either. As we said before, much bigger problems in that team than the people behind the wheel, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Aston Martin, another double points finish for them. Stroll running third for a big old chunk of that race. Something about those sort of conditions, and Lance Stroll just like comes to life.
What was concerning though, I think I joked about this at the time, but the drier and drier the track got, the slower and slower Lance Stroll got. It was just weird. Like, the more and more it got dry, the further he started falling backwards into Hulkenberg, into Hamilton, into whoever else. And he went from like running third to running, I think, like eighth at one point or something like that. Like, he just fell away, which is, I mean, it's weird, isn't it? He has these races in the wet where he looks, I was going to say talented then, I don't think that's the right word. Capable. Let's say capable. He looks capable. And then it gets dry and he's just Lance Stroll again.
I mean, I think, at least in part, I think the Aston Martin's harder on its tyres than other cars, so that will have played a part. But you look back to Istanbul a few years ago, it's exactly the same story. He was leading that race. He stuck it on pole. He was leading that race until it started drying out, and then exactly the same thing. He just fell backwards. But still a decent day for him. Picked up some points. He also, interestingly, he was the only driver when it was kind of starting to dry out early on before the rain came again. He was the only driver that started on Inters, that switch to slicks and then switch back to inters, which actually works out really well for him. They took the always be on the right tyre mantra to like the nth degree.
Yeah.
Like he did 6 laps on inters, came in 4 laps on slicks, and then back in for a new set of inters, and it actually worked out extremely well for him. So that was cool to see. Like that, they've really nailed the strategy from that point of view.
Yeah.
Alonso was pretty frustrated. He didn't think the team had given him the right strategy. I mean, ultimately, I think he was comparing himself to his teammate. If you look at his strategy compared to everyone else, it was pretty similar. The only mistake they made really was they came in for slicks way too early at the end. He did a good 4 laps more on the slicks than pretty much anyone else.
I mean, I'm pretty sure he was complaining way before that. There was a point early in the race, not early, but like midway through, I want to say, where he was on the radio with a line along the effect of, I don't know what it is, you guys always get it wrong for me, or something like that.
Yeah, something like that.
It was very GP2 engine rage
like,
moment from Alonso.
Bit much there.
But I mean, you know what it's like. He is that kind of personality a lot of the time, isn't he? Like if things aren't going his way, he's very agitated about it and very, very vocal about it. So yeah, I mean, still ended up with a point in the end. So was it 1 point?
A couple of points. He finished 9th.
No, yeah. So yeah, I mean, not a total loss, but
no,
I can imagine that Alonso is sat there thinking, "How am I getting beat so handily by Lance Stroll?" And that's where the anger comes from.
Yeah, exactly.
That is where the anger comes from.
If Lance is that far ahead of me, then something must be going wrong, and it ain't me. Quick word on Williams next. Pretty disappointed weekend for them. Both went out in Q2, only ended up with 1 car in the points. Albon had an all right day. He went from 13th up into the points, but Sainz kind of fell backwards. As I said, he had at least 1, possibly 2 bits of contact with Leclerc, which definitely won't have helped with him. It's starting to feel a bit to me like Williams. We know they started this season as kind of the pick of the midfield, and it's feeling a lot like the rest of the midfield are kind of closing the gap on them now. Like they don't seem to have that advantage they held at the start of the season anymore. They need an upgrade or 2 by the looks of it, I think.
Yeah, they've not had the greatest run generally at the moment, have they? I think we talked about it a little bit last week, but I mean, it was a bad weekend for them last week for sure, but not that great of a weekend. Definitely on the better side, but not where they've looked in recent times earlier in the season. So bit of a shame for them at home to not be able to do more with it, but points is better than none, I guess, in that side for Albon.
We talked about Mercedes a little bit already and how bad a day they had. Interestingly, Russell kind of stood by his choice to go onto the slicks early on. His point was the laps where he would have had the advantage were spent behind virtual safety car. So he kind of lost the advantage, which I think he's got a bit of a point. Like there were a few laps in that opening stint where he was like 2 or 3 seconds a lap faster than all the inters. The problem was there were other laps in that stint where he was like 4 or 5 seconds slower than them all. So maybe he's got a point. Maybe the VSC timing, lost that advantage. But ultimately, I think it probably was the wrong choice to switch when they did.
I mean, it's the whole VSC thing is, yes, it's unlucky, it's unfortunate, but it's also racing. That is the way it falls sometimes. Like it's like someone taking a pit stop and then the next lap a safety car being called and everybody behind them getting essentially a free quote unquote pit stop. But
you can't.
Yeah, it's just is what it is.
You can't exactly plan for unknowns like that, but at the same time, in conditions like that, you've got to know it's going to be more likely than usual that might happen. So
yeah, I mean, think about how many VSCs and safety cars we actually had through the race. Like we got to like lap 20 and we'd only had what felt like about 3 laps of actual running at one point. So
genuinely, like, by that point, I was like, if we get 20 racing laps at this race, we'll have done well.
Yeah. Luckily, we got more than that in the end.
Yeah. Antonelli had to retire because half of his diffuser was left behind on the track after Hadjar ran into the back of him. That was a scary crash from Hadjar's onboard. Like, there was just no warning at all that there was a car in front of him. I don't think anything he could have done about that. It was a pretty scary one.
Yeah, just driving into the mist, the spray, essentially.
Yeah.
And I mean, Antonelli possibly was a little bit slower than Hadjar expected, but to be brutally honest, from Hadjar's onboard, it was difficult to tell exactly where Hadjar even was. Like, for Hadjar, so you probably have to look at it from off-board footage, I think, to get the best idea. But you've got a potential Antonelli's maybe slowed earlier than normal because of the conditions, and it's caught Hadjar out. You could say that Hadjar can't see any of his reference points and doesn't realise he's steaming into the corner way fast and not slowed down as soon. Or it could be like 6 of one and half a dozen of the other, and it's a bit of both. So yeah, it's a tricky one, but a scary accident, and good job he came away from it unscathed, essentially.
Yeah. Well, I think maybe next week when it's an off preview week, we'll talk about this a bit more. But everything leading up to the race was all talk about Verstappen and Mercedes, and is that going to happen? Both George Russell and Max Verstappen looked sick to death of answering questions about it. But yeah, we'll maybe talk about that in a bit more detail next week, I think.
Let's save that for an off week.
Yeah, a bit more room. Last few bits to mop up. Ollie Behrman. The only rookie to finish the race, actually, was Ollie Behrman. All the other rookies retired. Really impressive in qualifying as well. Stuck at 8th on the grid, except for the fact that he had a 10-place penalty for an utterly stupid pit lane incident. Basically, under red flag conditions, he decided to go full beans into the pit entry, then hit the brakes with cold brakes, and ended up spinning into the wall at the pit entry, for which the stewards pretty justifiably gave him a 10-place grid drop, and I believe a penalty point or two. And it's not the first time this season he's broken like red flag procedure and all like yellow flag procedure. It's silly stuff that he needs to iron out, because he could have had a fantastic result at his first home race this weekend, and he ruined it because of that, basically.
Yeah, and the thing is like, you talk about rookie mistakes, and yes, they do happen, but behaving properly under safety parameters like yellow flags, red flags, safety cars, etc., they're things that no matter how rookie you are, you need to be adhering to those things.
Yeah, absolutely. He also had contact with his teammate Ocon at one point, and they had a nice that was synchronized spin, which was
looked beautiful in slow motion, the synchronized spin, but utterly ridiculous that they were putting themselves in that position.
Yeah. Ocon actually ran in the points early on as well, but I think he tried to take his first set of inters for like double laps of most people, and it just didn't pay off for him. And then anyone else we've not mentioned was a rookie, and they retired. Lawson was really unlucky. He got stuck in one of those 3 wide, and only one of the 3 of them actually knows it's a 3 wide sort of situations, which punted him off, which was a bit of a shame for him. But yeah, should we move on to some awards?
Yes, let's.
Driver of the day. Well, I want to give an honourable mention to Pierre Gasly. I think he did a really, really good job, but we all know where this is going.
This will be the quickest one of these decisions ever. Is Nico Hulkenberg?
It's obviously Nico Hulkenberg.
I think he won something like half of the vote as well.
Second week in a row, I think we've given it to Hulkenberg as well.
Yeah.
What about move of the day? There's a couple of Hamilton ones I remember that stood out to me.
Yeah, I think Hamilton round the outside of two cars at Farm, I think it was
Russell
one
and
that stuck out.
Ocon, I want to say.
Yeah, like he'd lost the place, I think, to them both,
Yeah.
and just found some grip in the wet stuff on the outside and took them both back, and while they were squabbling with each other a little bit, but yeah, just wily, opportunistic. One of those moments that I mentioned where you sort of saw flashes of like the Hamilton in the wet at Silverstone.
Yeah.
That was like one of those moments. So that was probably the main one for me. I don't know
Yeah,
if there was any others for you.
he passed Gasly later in the race, which was quite a well sort of excuse overtake. But yeah, I think that double one is hard to look by, so we'll give him that.
Yeah.
And then the last award.
Honestly, what the are we doing here?
I mean, initial honourable mention has to be the fact that I've magically changed locations in the cut between you saying we need to go to WTF and now doing WTF. Let's say sitting outside with a lovely backdrop is fantastic until you realise your MacBook is about to die and you have to come inside for power. You can kind of see it a little bit outside. You can see the
there's
trees.
Still some outdoors. We're fine.
Serious ones, though.
Yeah, we did mention this earlier, but Piastri getting on the radio to say, "Oh, if you don't think that that penalty was fair either, maybe we should have a little swap of positions and then we'll fight it out on track." Like, pull the other one, Oscar. Like, in what world do you think Lando leading his home race is going to be like, "Oh yeah, come on by, that's fair enough."
Yeah, it's just opportunistic racing driver, though, isn't it? I'm going to try and take advantage of it.
I mean, I think he said himself he never thought for a second that was going to work, but there we go. Also, the Lego trophies, for two reasons. Like, we love Lego on this podcast. Look behind me for those you watching the video.
And not, I was about to say, normally if I had my normal shelf behind me, that is also full of Lego.
A nice idea in practice. In execution, Lando's trophy looked like it was about to break in half.
Mm-hmm.
And Piastri in the press conference made a good point. I think he said to Hulkenberg, like, how does it feel to wait this long for your first podium? And then your trophy is made out of Lego and is about to fall apart.
Surely they've got to give him the real ones. I mean, Lando got the real Silverstone trophy at least, didn't he?
But that's just like a ceremonial thing and it stays at Silverstone,
To have not had the opportunity of winning at Silverstone and getting to hold that trophy because of a Lego deal would have been an absolute travesty especially for a British driver, but it would have been for anybody, but especially a British driver. You would hope that there's some sort of real trophy to go alongside the Lego ones. But who knows? Knowing F1 these days, who knows?
Yeah. Also, a photographer falling off a fence and landing on Lando and cutting his nose open wasn't a good look either.
What?
Did you not see that?
This is clearly something that I missed in the midst of being here.
So when they were like celebrating afterwards and there were fans on the other side of the fence, there was like a photographer was like climbing the fence and holding onto something that was attached to the fence, which then fell off, and he like fell backwards onto Lando and something like smashed Lando in the face. And I think later on he had he's already got a scar on his nose from something else that happened a few years ago, and he had like plasters on his nose or something.
Wow.
Yeah,
I missed that bit.
Anything else spring to mind?
I don't know. I mean, I know there was a lot of probably the Haas coming together and pirouetting off the circuit like they did. Like,
that was
pretty. Do you know what I mean? There's one general rule of motor racing with your teammate, and that is do not crash into each other. And it felt like they were both being a little bit stubborn about that move happening or not happening, and it led to them both going.
Teams,
always
seem to manage to do that. Like, it reminded me of, was it Grosjean and Magnussen back in the Rich Energy season? They had a similar coming together, I think, at the same corner actually.
I can't say it on the podcast because of the way that we usually try and keep things clean. But that's the one where Gunther's talking about Magnussen doing a certain kind of smash on his door.
Yes.
An F smash. Did you
That
just
was the
F
exact
smash my
phrase,
door?
yes.
That's the one. Yeah.
I suppose also there's Ollie Behrman just being an idiot in practice under a red flag. Like,
actually, yeah.
That fits the bill, actually.
Yeah, I think that is because the other one's a little bit of a racing incident. I guess it's not, but yeah, the red flag scenario.
Yeah,
I think
we'll give it to him.
That's a prime candidate.
Right. Do you want to quickly take us through predictions and fantasy leagues and all that?
Yes, I will. Not a great week for anyone, to be fair, in terms of the predictions league. Don't think many people had Max on pole, albeit one or two did. So there were people who scored a point there. A lot of people got Norris as a race winner, to be fair. Like I went for that good car with a home driver kind of combination. But then just everywhere else, people fell down. People, not that many people saw it going as low as 15 finishes. So there were points there, myself included, but not as many. Interestingly, nobody got Russell's position right for 10th. So no full points handed out there. And I'm just going to check I've got this name correct because I wrote it down and then I feel like I've just sort of half made it up. So I'm literally going to check it live just because I can. So Daniel Moulds was the only person to go as low as 8th with selection for Russell's finishing position. So Daniel gets us the half point that is available for the closest if no one's ever bang on, but was the only person to do that. So
Nice.
not a high scoring weekend at all across the board there, really. Doesn't do much for the standings in that case, but it does sort of carve out an official top 3 now. So we've got Gordon Barham still leading the way with 19 points at the moment. A single point behind is Michael Lebaldus on 18, and then Luke Cruikshank is on 17. So it's still pretty close there. It's almost as close as the real title in theory. I mean, it is as close as the real title, realistically, when you think about it. So yeah, that's all going well for those 3. Over in F1 Fantasy, our very own Sarah from Discord managed to score 291 points and win over there for the weekend. But overall, Wine Racing does still lead the way with 2,880 points. And then in GridRival, Chris, your DRS boost or whatever it's called on that one, I forgot.
Talent driver.
Talent driver on GridRival of Nico Hulkenberg, I believe, was the
kept the
choice
faith,
there.
Yeah.
A pretty high score in GridRival terms, 1,155. Like a good weekend in GridRival is usually breaking 1,000. Like that's your top 3 don't even always break 1,000. So 1,155. You don't win often, but when you do it in style. That's what I'll
Literally over a third of those points are Nico Hulkenberg.
Yeah, did you get like 400 and something?
400 and something, yeah, just for him.
I mean, with the way GridRival works, that all makes sense though, because you've got a combination of finishing position compared to teammate. Well, his teammate DNF'd in like 18th or something like that.
Yeah.
You've got number of overtakes or positions gained, depending on exactly how it works. So 19th to 3rd, that's a huge haul of points. You've got the podium bonuses, and then you're doubling it all with him being the talent driver. So, yeah, good weekend for you and Nico, that one.
Very happy.
Yeah, and then overall, Sazo123 still leads there with 11,299 points in total. But Repurposed has moved into second place with 11,268. But again, very close there, considering how many points you can score in GridRival and how tricky it can be to forget that someone's contract has expired and you have huge holes in your team like I do. It's pretty impressive to see everyone that close there. And if you want to get involved with any of those things, whether it's our fantasy league or our predictions league or the fantasy leagues, head to backofthegrid.com. You can register and be part of the fantasy leagues there as well by just clicking through the links to the fantasy page. And we mention it at this point every week, but we also do an IndyCar fantasy league this season through GridRival. So there's a link for that league on there as well. And that's that bit. time for a bit of inbox to see us out, I guess, isn't it?
Yep.
Keep me saying now. Stay out. Box. Hey, man.
First one this week's from Holly, who says, "What a British Grand Prix! Can't wait to hear your take on it and the long-awaited Hulkenberg podium. Wanted to offer a WTF moment. Okay, we just sort of semi-talked about this. F1 putting up black screens to block the podium and pit straight for fans. Then Lando trying to get over the screens to interact with fans anyway and getting the first place trophy knocked into his nose by photographers. I can't understand why the organisers would want to put up screens in the first place when so many iconic moments have happened there, including Lewis crowd surfing." And it was very odd, just these kind of big black banner things stuck up against the fence to block people from being able to see through it. The other thing I noticed that really irked me was on the inside of the first left of maggots, there was some advertising board up against the fence there, which means you couldn't stand at what we have described many times in the past as the best place in the world to watch Formula One cars.
I mean, you can't stand there pretty much anymore anyway. I think have I told you about this before?
They've built all those houses there, haven't they?
So they've built all the houses and the apartments and whatever they are along that stretch, which has taken away some of the general admission standing positions that were there. But then, as part of doing that, they've when they rebuilt the pit lane to the new pit lane, and they dug the ground out to build in it, so the pit lane actually drops down and then comes back up. Well, the other side of the fencing at Maggots and Beckett's basically does that. So there's a service road that accesses all the houses and apartments and the hotel and restaurant down the far end. But that road is dug down. So when you're walking along it, there's at parts, the wall is a good 5, maybe even 6 foot high, where that used to be ground level where you'd be walking along the top. And you can't always see over it at times. So they've completely ruined it. Great. I mean, you can still get to bits where you can see it. It's not completely gone, but it's not a realistic place to go watch the Formula One anymore because you end up stood all day, basically just stood looking at over the top of what they've dug out. It's weird.
It's frustrating. Yeah. I adore Silverstone. It's one of my favorite places in the world. I have so many amazing memories there, but some of the things they've done in recent years, like taking that space to build these multi-million-pound apartments, half of the pit straight now taken up with a expensive hotel rather than grandstand. It's so the place is being built for the 1% and not for the average Formula One fan who make the sport what it is. And it really frustrates me because it's such an amazing place, and we've seen so many fantastic races there, and I always love going there in person, but stuff like that really, really grates on me.
Yeah, I mean, for a long time, you quote-unquote average motorsport fan has been priced out of a weekend ticket at Silverstone anyway, especially if you then want to be able to camp alongside it. I mean, when you talk to people from Patreon who are in the Discord and have been this weekend, you get a little bit of insight as to what they've had to spend in order to just go down, be there for the weekend. And a lot of people get in the position where, well, I can go to Silverstone this year, but I then can't go again until 2028 or something, because it's more expensive than going on a full week holiday with your family. And we're not saying it should be dirt cheap or anything like that, but for a long time it's been a lot more affordable, and I mean, ultimately a better experience generally by going and buying tickets somewhere in Europe, flying out and spending a few days there, like the times that we've been in the past. And it is a shame because this thing, I know we've kind of got a little bit off topic from what Ollie was asking, but ultimately it's sort of anti-fan in a lot of ways, isn't it? It is marginalising out those people who want to be there for that moment.
And I mean, and to reward the people who've spent all that time and money to be there by sticking up some barriers so they can't celebrate with their favourite drivers. And the drivers can't celebrate with the fans. Like, Lando clearly wanted to go and be there and be celebrating with the fans and was like, couldn't do so. It was, really strange choices.
Yeah, unfortunate. We've got two that I'm going to kind of go through together here because they're similar notes. So we've got Jay Alexander says, "Hey man, since Binotto and Wheatley have taken over at Sauber, the team's last few races and the results especially have been getting better and better. Does this mark Audi out as a genuine threat for next year? And did Sainz possibly make a mistake by signing for Williams?" And then Wes says, "Hey man, Sauber have been on an upward trend lately. I know weather played a part in Nico getting this first podium, but do you think we might be seeing him at the pointy end of the midfield a little more frequently for the rest of the season? And can he continue to outscore Red Bull?" Which I can't remember the time span it's over, but
I think it's
in the last four races, Nico Hulkenberg alone has outscored both Red Bull drivers. is what that alludes to. I mean, quickly from me, I would say that I think this bodes well for Audi. You can see why I assume is the team that Audi is starting to build from the background, from like behind the scenes. They're trying to put people in place to run that team once it becomes Audi, is what it looks like. And you're probably starting to see the fruition of that coming together. So I think with proper manufacturer backing and them getting fully invested and on the grid from next season, you would hope it's going to only get better, but you can't say for sure.
Yeah, I mean, the whole Audi project started pretty messily. There was lots of a bit of a revolving door of personnel, but since Jonathan Wheatley and Mattia Binotto have kind of come in and have taken their roles, it definitely feels like that they've been, I suppose in many ways it's similar to James Vowles joining Williams. You've got someone like Jonathan. Well, I guess it counts for both of them. Someone coming from massive successful teams to a much smaller team, and you're going to be able to see all of these small things that can be changed to make it a more efficient operation, to make these marginal gains. And I think at the moment we're seeing a lot of that happening. I think Binotto being allowed to just do the tech stuff and not have to faff around being a team principal is clearly better than what Ferrari tried to do with him. He's a very, very smart engineer, and I think having him on board doing that is very good. Jonathan Wheatley, this is his first team principal role, but he seems extremely competent in that job, and they seem to be really doing a good job building the team around them. So, yeah, like for the last couple of years, like the amount of times these podcasts we've just like gone through the list of teams and then be like, "Oh, and Sauber were terrible," and that's basically all there is to say about them. And this season, they're in there, like, and I do as Wes asked, I do think we're going to start seeing them in that sort of bottom end of the points fight more regularly now. I think. Well, Bortoleto got his first points last weekend, didn't he? But I think we're going to start seeing him because he's been amazingly close to Hulk in qualifying. And I think if he can start putting his races together more, we could easily see both of them sort of fighting around the bottom end of the points.
Yeah, I think they just need to sort out that one lap pace. That seems to be like the race pace seems to be there for them now.
It's like Haas used to be.
Yeah. Yeah, in fact it was, yeah. Well, Haas used to have the opposite problem though, didn't they? Haas used to be able to drag it into Q3, get good results, but then fall backwards in the race.
Haas can do one or the other, can't they?
Yeah, and like Haas at the moment appears to be the other way around, like you say.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, considering where that Sauber was at the start of the season and how we were just saying this is comfortably the worst car and it's not going to bode well for Bortoleto being in such a bad car and not being able to show himself and prove himself, etc., to be in a position where that car's just finished on the podium, albeit in wet weather conditions that have mixed things up a little bit. And, you know, I think had some of the front runners not had bad days, Hulkenberg's probably a 6th place finish on in that weekend.
Yeah, that's possibly fair.
Or somewhere there or thereabouts. Like, you know, I'm not saying he'd have beaten everybody on merit, but he'd have been there or thereabouts. So to even be there from where they were at the start of the season is really, really good. And I think it does still show the potential that the Audi project will have going into next year.
Yeah. I mean, at this point, I think the big unknown and the thing that might end up tripping them up is the engine, because they're going into next year with the first engine they've ever built, basically, and that could very easily go one of two ways, which
I think
remains to be seen.
Yeah, I think given their sort of pedigree around motorsport, I'm not too concerned. And I mean, I know they've picked and chosen when they've been part of things like WEC, World Endurance, and things like that. But you know, they've been there and done it in other series, and I think that although I mean, I suppose a lot of what Audi has done in recent years has either been full combustion or full electric. I don't know what they've entered that's essentially been hybrid, unless DTM is using anything like that now. I know British Touring Cars does, but
DTM is basically GT3 these days.
Yeah, so probably not much in the way of hybrid in anything else Audi's done. I think that's maybe where they could fall down if they were going to, but the whole hybrid unit and combination is being simplified into next year anyway, isn't it? So that's part of the appeal for them, is that it was overcomplicated and they didn't want to invest the time and money developing that, whereas now it's a little bit more straightforward. So I think generally they'll be fine, but only time will tell, I guess. But the fundamentals, the base is right, at least at the moment.
I certainly have more faith in Audi than the Red Bull Ford project at the moment.
Really?
I think so.
Yeah. I mean, maybe Max is thinking the same thing too.
Well,
by recent scenarios. So, yeah.
Right. And I think at that point, that just about wraps up our British Grand Prix coverage. Busy old weekend. Thank you, as always, for joining us. If you want to get in touch with us for anything before next week, you can find us on all the social media things, backthegrid.com, which is where you can also check out how you're doing in the Prediction League and find out links to F1 Fantasy and GridRival. Patreon.com/backthegrid if you'd like to join our lovely Discord community. But yeah, we'll be back next week to preview the Belgian Grand Prix.
It won't be next week for a preview, I don't think.
There's a week off away.
Yeah, it's the 27th.
You're right. We have a couple of weeks off. Okay, yeah. Again, I'm so used to these back-to-back races. The idea of having 2 weeks off.
We'll be back next week to spend half an hour talking about will Max replace George Russell at Mercedes. Yes. And then we'll be back the week after that to preview the spot. Or is that
there we go.
Is that even going to work? I don't know. I've lost track of the days.
Whatever. We'll be back.
Something to that effect.
Yes. But yeah, thanks so much for joining us, and goodbye.
Bye, everyone.